right. The National Park Service says it's restoring the statue of a Confederate general that was toppled by protesters in D.C.'s Judiciary Square in 2020. This is to comply with the president's executive order calling for, quote, the restoration of truth and sanity to American history. You may remember the president has already called for the beautification of D.C.
We're joined this morning by D.C.'s shadow representative, Oye Owolewa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with this Confederate statue. Came down in 2020 during the summer of protests following the murder of George Floyd. What do you make of the decision to restore it and put it back on display in public, the only Confederate statue on public display in D.C. outside?
Yeah, this issue looks like another blatant attempt to really thumb the needle to the black and brown community. And D.C. is Trump's ground zero. You know, we're talking about removing Black Lives Matter Plaza, threatening some of our Smithsonian museums, and now seeing the reinstallation of a Confederate statue that a lot of D.C. residents are very concerned about.
How does that impact people in the city? Emotionally, how does it impact the black and brown community?
I mean, we just see it, whether it's the black and brown community, the LGBTQ plus community, or just D.C. residents in general. Yeah. We're just seeing the federal government thumb their needle on us. We're fighting for D.C. statehood to have more control over our own way of life, and we're seeing once again President Trump just do things just because he can.
So the same folks who say that, who agree with you, also point out that America's history needs to be told in full, the good, the bad, and the ugly. To that point, we have a statement that Eleanor gave to the Washington Post saying she believes Confederate statues should be placed in museums as historical artifacts, not be in public in sort of a way that honors them. She views them as racist and traitors. Do you agree with that? Maybe putting it in museums and with the proper context around why these statues were up in the first place?
Absolutely. I believe we should tell the entire story. I'm not saying we should remove the Confederate statues forever and throw them in the trash can, but there is a way to honor history and also respecting the people of the city, right? You know, we're talking about folks who were complaining about the Black Lives Matter Plaza being ripped up, and there wasn't any consideration to our feelings. We're talking about our legislation being compromised by Congress, our budget being compromised by Congress, and right now we just want to have the same sovereignty and the same protections as our neighbors in Maryland and Virginia do.
So you talk about statehood, and there's the famous license plate,
exactly.
Right? But this president makes statehood seem farther away than ever when he's actually talking about possibly taking the district over again. And D.C.'s had home rule since, what, 1973?
Absolutely. People are very concerned. Not only are we fighting for statehood, but also our home rule, which allows us to elect our mayor, to elect our council members, and also to address public safety in the way we want to. And we understand that crime and public safety is a hot button issue, but we also want to be able to have control over our own ways, because the best way we can handle our public safety issues is if we have full autonomy over it.
Well, speaking of that, obviously crime is very, very, very important. It has to be difficult, I would think, to get a handle on it when there's disagreement about whether violent crime is up or down. Now, when it comes to something like homicides, yes, we can point out on paper, factual, this person, this many people have been killed, this many people haven't been killed, it's up or down. But when you talk about the violent crime part of this, does D.C. have an issue when it comes to how violent crimes are classified, and to the point the Fraternal Order of Police makes, D.C. may be cooking the books to get those numbers down?
Well, we understand that public safety is a huge issue. One murder is too many. I haven't seen too much evidence of people doctoring the details, but at the same time, whether you live in Georgetown, Congress Heights, or even Foxhall communities, one car break-in is too many. One carjacking is too many, and we're very concerned about that. Now, we're seeing our trends go down. Public safety remains a big issue regardless of where you live in this city or where you live in this country. So, like I said, no other city, state are able to really have as over-police as we do, Capitol Police, MPD, and now our president is saying we're going to do.
So regardless of what you may think the numbers are, does it warrant a federal takeover of the district in your mind, yes or no?
Absolutely not. I believe D.C. residents are some of the smartest people in this country. We have great leadership, and we should be able to have our own way of controlling our things uncompromised.
And there's really no way to fight back should the president choose to do this.
Well, I think that people should stand up a little bit. I think we should force leaders like myself to continue being vocal about it. At the end of the day, D.C. residents or lawmakers all around the country want to see us fight for ourselves. I've had conversations with other Congress members behind the scenes, and they told me that until D.C. gets up and march for ourselves, they won't feel as strongly about not only supporting our own home rule, but also supporting D.C. statehood. So it's time that some of our leaders stand up. I know it's uncomfortable because Trump is a president, and he has a Congress, Senate, and essentially control of the Supreme Court. But if we can't fight for ourselves, who's going to stand with us?
All right. Well, we know Eleanor Holmes Norton has stood for D.C. for a long time. Real quick, yes or no, do you think she should run for re-election?
I think anybody that wants to run should continue running. I believe that Congresswoman Norton has the right to determine her own self-determination and her own steps forward. And to be honest, D.C. really supports her and supports her legacy.
All right. Shadow Representative Oye Owolewa, we appreciate your time this morning.